Good morning. It is indeed Saturday morning, which means it's time for a Rockler in-store demo on the internet. Today we're talking about table saws. A few years ago at Woodworker's Journal, we did a survey where we asked woodworkers how many of them regularly use their blade guard on their table saw. The results? Over 60% of them said they did not. In fact, 20% of them said they couldn't even find their blade guard if they were asked to. I mentioned those stats because we're talking about table saw safety today, and I'd like to invite even experts to stick around. You know, it can't hurt. Let's start with just a couple of basics. It's always a good idea, regardless of the woodworking operation, to protect your ears, your lungs, and your eyes. And today's safety equipment is so easy to wear and comfortable that even curmudgeons like myself have a hard time putting it aside. Now let's talk keeping your fingers away from the blade. Push sticks and blocks. Whether they're shop-made or a high-quality manufactured model, their goal is to help you safely control your stock. At the same time, they keep your fingers away from the saw blade. So a reasonable question would be, when do you use a push block or a push stick and when don't you? Well, the answer is when an operation is safe and easy without the push block, like, say, ripping a wide piece of plywood, that's the way to roll. But if the piece of wood that you're ripping is 4 inches wide or narrower, I always use a push stick. When you think about it, there's a couple areas of danger with the table saw. The first, of course, that we've just been talking about is that you get your finger tangled up with the blade. You can even cut it off. That'd be terrible. The second is when the blade grabs a piece of stock and throws it violently back. That's called kickback. So how do we prevent kickback? There's a couple of things we can do. First and foremost is using a riving knife. A riving knife is kind of like a splitter, but if you notice, it keeps a constant relationship with the blade as it rises and falls. When you rip solid lumber, often internal stresses are released and the board can distort, causing increased friction on the saw blade. The riving knife lowers that friction and prevents the distortion from getting worse. The anti-kickback pawls help as well. In addition to the riving knife and the anti-kickback pawls, some saws, like this one from Laguna, have a fore and aft fence adjustment. Pull the fence back like so, and any distortion of the wood occurs beyond the constriction of the fence and the blade. This is a great feature. Kickback can also occur if you lose control of the board while you're ripping it. So, to avoid that, use a proper stance, stand off to the side so if it does kick back, you're safe, and then engage the blade slowly. Engage the fence securely as the wood approaches the blade. Then push the board through the saw blade at a constant speed, not too fast or slow. As the stock goes past the back of the saw, a roll-off stand of some sort keeps the wood at the same plane as the tabletop. Switch to a push stick to complete the cut. Cross-cutting is another task that the table saw excels at. But once again, we need to use proper technique to avoid kickback. I always use a miter gauge or a crosscut sled when you're doing this operation. A sacrificial fence on the miter gauge is important. And always use a standoff block to keep your stock from getting trapped between the blade and the fence. Another benefit of the fore and aft type fence is that it works great for cross-cutting, and you can avoid the standoff block. So those are the basics of cutting safely on the table saw, but here's a couple more points for your consideration. First, I always use a sharp saw blade and one that's appropriate for the type of cut and the type of material that you're using. And your saw should be properly set up. Miter slots and fence aligned to the saw blade, and always use your blade guard when possible. And finally, use common sense. If you're tired, just take a break. And if a specific operation feels unsafe to you, stop and figure out a safer way to do it. I'm Rob Johnstone from Woodworker's Journal. Thanks for watching.